Welcome to Talking Africa here on Arise News, a special weekly edition of Africa Wrap, where we take time to reflect on the fortunes and affairs of the emerging continent within its own countries and across the world in an hour of conversation with African commentators and thought leaders. And this week we welcome Temitope Olodo, a terrorism expert and security strategist with deep experience across Africa. Also with me is Joseph Dankwa, the Ghanaian political activist and commentator. Thank you to both of you for coming in. Now, this week, Malawi announced that it's to repatriate its citizens from South Africa following an upsurge in violence against migrants. At least 5 foreigners, including a 14-year-old boy, have been killed in attacks in South Africa's coastal city of Durban since last week. Many shops in Johannesburg's central business district have also closed due to fears of attacks, and this in the Rainbow Nation, itself for so long the victim of its own institutional racism, apartheid. Well, in a moment, we'll ask what's gone wrong and what's to be done. But first, our reporter Georgina Ryle explains what lay behind the protests.
These violent scenes from the streets of Durban have left South Africa shaken. This man was caught on camera throwing a brick in another person's face. Why? Because of his nationality. At least 5 people have been killed as a result of 2 weeks of these attacks, with more than 1,000 people who now feel forced to flee their homes and businesses. Zimbabwe and Malawi have already begun evacuating their citizens. Many others have retreated to refugee camps, like this one on the outskirts of Durban.
Mohammed Adam, Mohammed Jamal.
For this Somali man, now a refugee, these attacks have been on an unprecedented scale.
There was a sort of intimidation, but things like this never happened to me. I never experienced people coming to, bomb the place and patrolling the place, trying to ban your life. I never experienced that kind of situation.
So what has caused this sudden rage? The instigators of the violence believe undocumented migrants are leaving nationals out of work. The ruling ANC party have now come forward to urge that this is not the case.
Most of the foreign nationals in our country are documented. The few that are not documented do not constitute the majority of foreign nationals in South Africa. And therefore foreign nationals in South Africa who are working through work visas or critical skills visas or investing in the South African economy are actually paying the tax.
But this statement is being called too little, too late. President Jacob Zuma has been criticised for failing to protect these migrants earlier. The finger of blame for current frustrations has also been directed at Zuma and his party. Almost a quarter of South Africans are unemployed, with joblessness spiralling to record lows last year. And despite boasting Africa's second largest economy, the country has one of the highest inequality rates in the world. Some victims say these attacks are merely the work of an extremist minority, and that the blame truly lies with the onlookers who have stayed quiet.
Some South Africans are not happy about what's going on, but we are condemning their silence. A minority of people are hurting us, but the majority of others are not speaking out.
But for now, migrants continue to pack up their businesses and take shelter where they can. Georgina Ryle, Arise News.
Well, with me to discuss this rather nettlesome issue are Temitope Olodo and Joseph Dankwa. Thank you very much indeed to both of you for coming in. I mean, let's start with the root of all this, Temitope. I mean, what's your take on this bad feeling towards outsiders in South Africa?
The whole genesis of it is the belief that the foreigners or the Africans have come in to grab the resources from the commoners, the people in South Africa who believe that is their right. Of course it is, to get jobs, to have shops, to own these things. And yet these individuals come from within Africa, and within months, years, they're owning shops. Instead of them being the people buying, they are the ones buying, and they're seeing these people riding big cars and things. And the narrative is that these people have actually come to suck them dry. And I think that is, and this has been going on for months and years, migrants have been killed.
But what is interesting is that it seems to be focused on foreign Africans and Asians alone. I mean, so the whole thrust of it appears to be Afrophobia, not xenophobia.
Totally, I agree with you, and I think it's not been helped by some of the statements, guided statements from people within authority who have been making comments that have been inciting or more or less helping to solidify that unspoken.
And of course, you're referring to the Zulu king who made those inflammatory comments and so on. But I'm just going to come to you, Joseph. I mean, what is perhaps more shocking is South Africa's, I mean, this is happening, in a country that went through years of apartheid. I mean, with all that Nelson Mandela and the country did to end apartheid, with all the African countries coming together to try and help South Africa and support South African blacks to end that thing. I mean, you'd think that you'd never again hear of any form of discrimination in South Africa.
Yeah, it's this acts which has happened in South Africa this week has thrown out of the window the principle of the Rainbow Nation. South Africa, for over almost 50 years, had suffered the apartheid, discriminatory regime. Now, I would have thought that after 20 years of the ANC being in power, they would have forgotten that part of their history and moved ahead. When a country starts to look back, it shows that it has not dealt with its past. If you look behind you, you can see that it was a history which was bedeviled. It's a country which was bedeviled with discrimination, social inequalities, economic, deprivation. When Mandela came in, they had this policy called the BBE, the Black Empowerment Enterprise, where they were giving blacks the opportunity to go into business. But then people thought that the blacks who had made it economically, they would therefore help this sort of trickle-down effect.
Right, and that didn't happen.
That didn't happen. When you have people like Cyril Ramaphosa, who's deputy president, and he's one of the most...
Absolutely. So Temi Tope, really, this is about the Rainbow Nation's broken dream.
Yeah, it is a broken nation.
And people are angry because of that.
They are angry, but they are diverting their anger to the wrong people, because these individuals only came to South Africa, saw the advantage there, took advantage of it, not in a negative way, but used it to develop themselves. And what is happening now is that South Africa is dripping to a very dangerous situation where if this issue is not arrested quite quickly, what we're going to find out is that Africans will start returning back, or they might just take up arms to defend themselves, as we've seen this week.
Temi Tope talks about entering a danger zone. Could it get any worse than this?
Well, I mean, many of those guys who are in South Africa, the Africans of Africa, are from countries where they've seen war. For instance, in a place like Zimbabwe, you have got Robert Mugabe there for so many years, where people had to fight against such a regime. You had people from Angola, Mozambique, who have seen civil wars over years. People are going to be battle ready to fight against them. But you know the reason why? The narrative has not been told this generation of South Africans. These are countries who stood side by side, the frontline states, where had countries like Zimbabwe and Zambia who were bombed and attacked by the South African regime because they were harboring.
Right. But in fairness to South Africa, it's not all South Africans. I mean, we've seen protests against this anti-sort of immigration, and of course the government has suggested that there is an element of criminality in all of this. Do you think that might help to offset or perhaps knock out, if you like, the bad elements and overshadow them?
Yeah, I think the next step is what everybody's waiting for. We've noticed that a lot of African countries have been quite silent about their response. They've not been critical of the South African government because they want them to arrest this situation, to have a hold of it. And we've seen that most of these enforcement have been trying, for security agencies have been trying to keep the two parties, away from each other. But they need to now start making arrests. They need to to be quite tough on it. And once they could show that leadership, that they are handling it, then things might return back to normal.
Okay, we'll take a short break here, but when we come back, we'll be talking about Libya and the human tragedy of the increasing number of migrants who are losing their lives in pursuit of realizing their dream of making it into Europe. Thousands killed, but what more can be done to protect them? Do stay with us.
The best way to predict the future is to create it. There's a special breed of achievers out there called tomorrow's people. They imagine what will be and strive to make it happen. They refuse to wait for the future. Tomorrow bends and conforms to their ideas. At Access Bank, we share the same sentiments. Our mantra for success is simple: speed, service, and security. Tomorrow's people own the future because they keep the world turning. That is the power of taking tomorrow.
Welcome back to Talking Africa here on Arise News. Now, more than 3,000 people are estimated to have died in the Mediterranean Sea last year. The Pope has warned the waters are in danger of becoming a vast cemetery. People, smugglers, have been described as the most ruthless travel agents on the planet, and the Italian Navy rescue mission has been downsized among claims that helping migrants at sea creates a pull factor. Well, let's continue the conversation with my guest, Temitope Olode, a terrorism expert and security strategist with deep experience across Africa. Also with me is Joseph Danquah, the Ghanaian political activist and commentator. Now, Joseph, there has been a suggestion that these people who do the smuggling are sort of high-class criminals. What do you think facilitates their trade? I mean, do we have any idea who's doing the smuggling and what their background is?
You see, Libya now is a country getting into a failed state. Because there is lack of security in Libya, these human traffickers are able to patrol the coast and take these people across. And there's a belief that many of them are linked to the militia groups or the warlords, and this is a way of sponsoring their war, because some of the warlords control the oil area, some don't, and they need money, and apparently they're collecting $3,000 a head on each of these migrants crossing the seas, which is a lot of money. And you see, they're doing it with so much, will, and they've got some sort of clout. Many of these who are being smuggled across owe their lives to them. They want to come out of this intergenerational poverty, generational poverty, where people are, they might be the first person in their family to try to come to Europe, so therefore they do try and send money home to help the families come out of poverty, which is a cycle, and it's a very sad situation.
Well, I mean, Temitope, the fact is that, these people are people living on the razor edge of life, and they're trying to get off what somebody described as a stricken belt. So it doesn't matter what you do, even if you stop those smugglers, these people are going to keep coming.
Yes, and if we look at the Gaddafi era, post-Gaddafi era, there were two kind of graves that we had. We had the people during the Gaddafi era that were dying in the deserts in their hundreds, and the report was very low. It wasn't trickling out then. Now they've moved because of the insecurity in that region. There's that passage for them now, for the smugglers to be able to move them to the sea, and that's why they're dying, and that's the reason why we're knowing more about it. From a security perspective, it's a very serious issue, because we know that it's not just about the economic security issue, it's also about the proper security issue in Europe. And that's the reason why a lot of people are concerned about how Europe is handling this and what kind of strategy could be put forward to address this issue, not just in terms of them becoming public asylum seekers, in Italy, or being able to distribute them across Europe, but actually to address the challenges at home that is bringing them across the border.
Right, that's a good point, because of course we're hearing today, talking about security issues, that some Muslims have been arrested in Italy because they threw the Christians overboard. Yeah. And so there was an issue of religious hate, and they're apparently being, they're going to be prosecuted for that. But the other question, of course, that human rights groups and so on are raising is that these people are fleeing from wars and from repression, and that under international law they have the right to seek asylum and to ask Europe to help them escape from conflict. Do you think that this should influence European policy rather than just being a sense of moral obligation?
You see, yes, policy, but then if you don't have the resources, how can you back your policy? Because many of these people are coming to areas like, let's say in the Lampedusa, for instance, they're overstretched. Italy is a country which is not doing very well economically compared to other European countries. And also say Africa needs to take a blame for this. If African leaders had offered good governance, alternative good governance, people would not be fleeing and risking their lives to cross the borders of Libya into Europe.
Yeah, but the fact is that they are. So,
yes,
so the question is, what sort of policy should Europe adopt now? And I'm going to put that question to you, Temi Tope. Okay. There have been suggestions, for example, that if perhaps you get the Western embassies to process these people and give them legitimate entry into Europe, that might forestall people dying on the high seas and all the dangers they have to go through. There's suggestions that this might be a good way for the EU to at once carry out its responsibilities under international law and prevent people from needlessly dying.
I totally agree 100%, because that is actually the way to go. If you're fleeing persecution, we're talking about whether you're claiming asylum or humanitarian protection, there are very straightforward or very strict rules about what to claim. These individuals are actually coming from areas where they are under persecution. So when you look at it, they will get to the pass back. Now, what Europe should do is actually have a roadmap on how to deal with it and how to distribute these individuals equally.
That's a good point, and I want to take up that with you, Joseph, because 50% of all refugees are going to just 5 member states of the European Union, which of course has 28 members. So some people are arguing that there should be more burden sharing, that all the member states should contribute to manage the problem. How do you think member states will react to that?
Well, in Europe now, there is a high rise of dissatisfaction about immigration. It's across the board.
Huge wave of anti-immigration.
Yes, it's across the board. It's across the board, all of Europe. And if this is not handled very well, it can spark attacks on foreigners.
And of course, the elections coming up.
Yes.
And so this is clearly going to be a very controversial move if it was to be adopted by the European Union.
Yes, and if you look now across Europe, the far right is having a big and larger voice, and we should be very careful about this.
Okay, for the moment, we will come back to this issue, I'm sure, over time. But let's take another short break for now. But when we come back, we'll be taking a look at some of the many positive stories to emerge from Africa over the last 7 days. Stories picked by my guests. Stay with us.
Wherever and whatever your banking needs, Guarantee Trust Bank will be there, now and into the future. Because you're at the heart of everything we do. Guarantee Trust Bank, proudly African, truly international.
Welcome back to Talking Africa here on Arise News. Time now to take a look at some of the many positive stories which have come out of the continent this week. I'm joined by Temitope Olodo, a terrorism expert and security strategist, and also with me is Joseph Danquah, the Ghanaian political activist and commentator. Now, Temitope, the first story that caught your eye was about 3 children who were kidnapped in Nigeria, yes, but have now been found. They were actually kidnapped by their nanny, weren't they?
Yes, they were. And this, again, is a classic example of what is happening where you don't have proper policy in place. And these kids were kidnapped by the nanny that was employed, online, and
apparently after the first day, it was her first day of work, and she kidnapped the kids.
Yes, and not only did she do that, but when she's been nabbed now, she's been picked up by the police, who found out that that is a business, a family business that they're doing. And this again explains, why, institutions need to be very strong. Because what we have here in the UK, for example, like CRB check, where you could check somebody's employer to make sure that they don't have any criminal record, or at least you could have a way of ensuring that you are safety within the household, is non-existent. Everything is based on recommendation and names. And this individual disappeared with the kids, and there's no family member to hold. And it's good news that the kids were found abandoned. They were found.
But there was talk of a ransom, though.
Yeah, they initially asked for ransom, and I think with Twitter, this information was going on Twitter.
Well, there's some suggestion the family paid something. I mean, do you know anything about it?
No, nothing so far in the media in terms of whether ransom payment was made. But for the family must definitely have been targeted. The woman must have surveyed the environment to see, in order to ask for the kind of amount that they asked for. But the good news is that kids were found alive and well, and I think there is now discussion about what do you do with people you're employing within the household. There is a consciousness within Nigeria now to say, okay, what do we do? How do you check this?
It's going to make people very cautious about going online and doing things, because the traditional way of doing it was always to have somebody or some relative of theirs or something would be brought from the village to come and live with you. So people are going to think twice about this online thing.
Yes, but again, because when the environment where it happened is one of this metropolitan city, but again, people are getting a bit wary about bringing family members, because they tend to have challenges in less than 1 or 2 years of having them within the environment, in terms of
basically you start looking after them. Right. Okay. Now, Joseph, something that spotted your eye, and it's a trove of coins.
Yes.
$50 million worth. Where is it? I'd like to get some of it.
Well, it was off the coast of Namibia, and this was a ship called the SS City of Cairo, where it was torpedoed in 1942. Charles, 73 years ago, it was torpedoed, and it was underground. It was said to be one of the deepest salvages ever in modern history, where these deep sea divers went in, discovered that the wreckage was still intact, and it was eventually brought. They were able to recover this boot, but then this booty. But what's happened now that it's been taken to the His Majesty's Treasury. It's been melted, and I don't know where it is now. But basically,
which Majesty are you talking about?
You
say his or her?
Her Majesty. Yeah. So what happens is that it's been.
So it was found in international
waters. Yes.
Okay. Right.
And then
it's sort of no man's land.
Yes. And now what you were saying is that
and Her Majesty established acquisitive control.
Control over it. Yes. The UK government took control of it, and they've realized some archaeologists have come to the conclusion that there might be many of these out in the deep seas, and there's a need for archaeologists across the world, especially in Africa, to put their heads together and go on such expeditions again to find out lost treasures.
And Temitope, another story you wanted to talk about. And that was the week the world marked the one-year anniversary of the Chibok girls.
Yes, this story actually caught my my attention because of the swift approach that the president-elect, took in, coming up with reassurance, and actually having an article written, in the newspaper to talk about, what he will do, not promising to be a messiah, but saying we will look at it. Compared to a year ago, when the sitting president was actually dancing away when this incident was happening. And now, we know that some of the girls might have been scattered around, but he's saying, I will work with the family, I will work with the security agencies, I will work with other groups. And that's a positive story. The fact that we're not seeing the leadership, even though he's not taking up arms, taking up, his
well, for the moment, it's just words, isn't it? We'll see what happens when he takes over. Now, Joseph, you wanted to talk about the first Nigerian to do the North Pole Marathon.
Yes, the lady called Tunde Morgan, 42-year-old lady. She
with 4 children.
Yeah, 4 children. Yes, she ran the
living in
Qatar. Yes, no snow. She ran
from extreme heat to extreme cold.
Yes, and she was amongst 44 competitors from 22 countries. She was able to complete the race and put the Nigerian flag on the North Pole. She said she was a lady who weighed over 121 kilograms, and she said it helped her, lose weight, and she became going in healthy shape. And she just said she's taking up marathon running as seriously now, and then she's up for another challenge. And this shows that, no matter what part of the world you live in, you can take up extreme challenges.
It's the will, isn't it?
Yes, the willpower to overcome adversity.
Well, it was brilliant to see that flag mounted.
Yes, it was negative 41 degrees, mind you, and extraordinarily cold. I bet you, Charles, you wouldn't even survive in negative 10.
Yeah, no, I certainly wouldn't.
Yes,
but let's move on. Temi Tope, you wanted to talk about the creation of the security network in Kenya.
Yes, I was happy that to see that the divide, the war that has been promised by the Kenyan government is now coming up. A lot of emotional kind of policy have been coming out of Kenya, including asking for the refugee camp to be closed within 3 months. But this is one policy that has divided a lot of people. But the good news out of it is that it's creating jobs for the youth.
Well, let's see if it's going to make a difference in terms of security
and in terms of benefits. That's what is important.
Finally, Joseph, Malawi's President Peter Mutharika has approved a law which lifts the age of marriage from 16 to 18.
Yes, there was a big problem about that in Malawi, where a lot of young girls were being married off because of the problem of poverty. A country of 15 million people, half of 7.5 million are living under the poverty line, which is very, very sad. So many people were giving their children into marriage to be able to come off, like maybe to come off that poverty cycle. So the president says that no, you have to be 18 before you get married, and human rights activists, lawyers, gender activists are very happy about this, that there's been a positive change on this issue.
Okay, Joseph Dankwa and Temi Tope Olodo, thank you very much indeed. Now stay with me to join our next guest, the founder and star of Osibisa, Teddy Osei. He'll be in the studio right here after this short break.
There is a reason Africa is called the new frontier. What was once potential is now an opportunity ready to be seized. Once revered for our resources, today's wealth lies in our people. People who build the cities that shape the future. People who know an idea in one place means business in another. A generation for whom technology means there are no borders, no boundaries. We are the new lions in a brave new world, kings of the urban jungle. And there's a bank that puts the world in our pocket and the future in our hands. UBA, Africa's global bank.
Welcome back to Talking Africa here on Arise News, our special weekly edition of Africa Wrap, where we take time to reflect on the fortunes and affairs of the emerging continent, talking in depth with guests who know Africa and care about its future. Now, they're possibly the greatest band to have come from Africa. They've released 22 albums, had 6 #1 hits, and have played a pivotal role in developing an awareness of African music among European and North American audiences. I'm talking about Osibisa, and I'm delighted to introduce my next guest here in the studio, founder and star of the band, Teddy Osei. But before I talk to him, let's take a listen to the brilliant Osibisa in performance. Of course, the leader of the amazing Osibisa joins me now in the studio. Teddy, really honored to have you here and to see you again. Let's go back to the beginning. Where did it all start?
To start with, it's amazing for me to be here sitting with you for this interview. I never thought that would happen, but it has.
I'm very honored.
Thank you. When you talk about Osibisa, it started in 1969. But when you talk about coming to UK, it was 1962. You know, and from 62, I started very poorly, because when I came here, the weather was terrible. That was February in 1962.
So wet and cold.
Well, that was. But I had, stuck in there, and went to my own private school before the Ghana government gave me a scholarship to study music.
And of course, that wet weather was a bit of a shock to you, wasn't it? The cold weather, because I mean, you'd come from a tropical environment.
Yeah, but the thing is, I never thought. I know, London or UK will be cold, but I never thought that like that at all. And I got in here early in the morning. That was about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't fancy it at all.
So you then got a scholarship given to you by the Ghanaian government to study music.
Yes.
What happened after that?
Well, I did study music, and after the then government, which is Nkrumah's government, was overthrown, then the scholarship was withdrawn.
But then you went on to form a band called Cat's Paw.
Yes.
Which was like an early sort of forerunner, if you like, of Osibisa.
It was. What happened was I was just, moving around with African musicians, and especially Ghana and Nigerian musicians, to run up the high life situation here, and it went on very well. But that was during the summertime. But then I decided that, okay, now I'll go for professional.
And then you brought your brother, Mac Tonte,
yes,
who unfortunately is no longer with us,
yes,
and of course Solar Mafia, who is still with us. You brought them to the UK to join you, and then Osibisa was essentially born.
Yes.
What do you remember from that time?
Yeah, at that time, as I was saying, Saul Amafio was already here in the UK, so I teamed up with him and trying to get the African scene going on. At that time, we didn't have much. All we had was Nigerian artists from Nigeria, you know, and that's a fella and others were here, we formed Casper, but Casper was more of playing cover songs. You know,
right. But then you moved on to Osibisa. Your brother joined you. Yes. Solar Mafia joined you. And what I find astonishing is that the music melody maker was sent to come and listen and assess your sound.
Yes.
And it was Richard Williams, wasn't it? The guy who came, and he was completely blown away. Yes. I've got your biography, and I'm trying to sort of remember the words that he actually used. But the effect of it, he actually said that Osibisa had broken the sound barrier. That was his definition, wasn't it?
That definition was fantastic. It really brought you know, Osibisa up, and it made all the musical you know, papers write about Osibisa, and that got us our first name gig at the Ronnie Scott's Club.
And it was the uniqueness of your music, the fact that you were a fusion band. Yeah. You've been called the first African world music band. You had elements of jazz, rock, soul, African high life. I mean, extraordinary mix of music.
Well, that was what I intended to do, actually. You know, after I stayed here and played rock music, jazz, or whatever. It came to a time that something got to be done about African music. But the thing is, African music I've been here, I've been in the UK for a long time, but not exploded that much. So I thought that we should, you know, find musicians like West Indian, which is Caribbean musicians, in to make it quite extraordinary.
More international. I mean, you were the first band to actually integrate Africans and West Indians, Caribbean people. And you know, anybody who listened to your music would find something they could relate to.
Definitely. And you know, we've been the people. You know, I mean, grown-ups came in our concert and they said they've been healed, you know, because the music has taken them somewhere else, you know, different altogether.
But as you became more popular, people, I mean, a lot of your people around you wanted you to make your music more mainstream. What stopped you from doing that?
Well, the thing is, you know, it was my decision that, you know, where we are and where we've got to, we've got to continue. But then, you know, the world is the world. Everybody wants us to, the record companies mostly want us to be more commercial, so that
they'll make more money.
Money and appeal to people, also for the record company as well.
But you were still driven by that sense to retain the African identity, but also to make a difference. And you then went to Ghana and you set up a recording studio and a theatre complex to help younger sort of high life musicians. And the idea was to promote African music. Why was that so important to the band?
It was because at that time the Ghanaian musicians were more of you know, doing more of Western music instead of playing, especially the high life and other traditional musicians music.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what happened.
Well, we'll take a very short break here, but when we come back, we'll be talking about how Teddy Osei is using music to help empower and support underprivileged children in Ghana. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Talking Africa here on Arise News. Let's continue our conversation with my guest, the founder and star of Osibisa, Teddy Osei. Now, Teddy, you are also, in addition to being a consummate musician and the founder of Osibisa, you're the patron of Dream Child Foundation. Tell us about that.
Well, Dream Child Foundation, I got to Ghana in 2010. And there was this guy, which I knew a long time ago. He studied in America and got back to Ghana. And he had this idea of a dream child, you know, so he got this Dream Child Foundation. And he talked to me about it, and I said, yes, it was a brilliant idea, you know, and I will follow it. I'll follow it with everything.
Tell us how it actually works, because I understand the foundation seeks to use the culture of music to empower and support the African child.
Yes. Well, you know, the African child thing was what really got me interested, you know, because I like African things. You could see that I wrote Happy Children and all that, so all that was in me. So you know, I did help to bring up the Dream Child. We had concerts about Dream Child, and we visited a lot of homes.
So for you, it was a logical thing to do.
It was.
You also used your music to raise funds for the foundation.
Yes,
Tell us how that actually happened.
We did concerts in Accra, you know, and people came in to patronize, and then what again? And then we established a kind of ideas of how we can raise by asking people to donate and things like that.
Now you've met some of the children who the foundation has helped, who are beneficiaries of the foundation. Tell us about those children.
Well, the children that we try to help here was children who were without families, without who have been left behind, and things like that. And it was so encouraging to see how they actually smile, you know, and that made me very proud as well.
And of course, Ghana is a country that is obviously still developing. What more do you think needs to be done to help the socio-economic situation in that we improve?
Well, there are so many few things that got to be done here, you know. As we are talking now, we don't have a full electricity in Ghana, you know, so people are actually suffering. Industries are breaking down and things like that. But what we hear is the government is trying to fix all that, and we are hoping that it will be done.
Yes, and of course, at the heart of a lot of what you've done, beyond this foundation, has always been to sort of reach out to people. I remember reading that at the height of the war in Lebanon, you went there and held a concert. Yes. And I remember this extraordinary story about you being caught at the borders and things. Yes. And then you also went to South Africa, which was quite controversial at the time, because there was a ban against musicians. Yes. Tell us about that. I mean, what was it like during the worst years of apartheid? You went there to perform, but you were aiming to perform to a predominantly black audience.
Yes. It started in early 70s. That South Africans want Osibisa, because at that time we were on a prime, and the musicians union didn't allow us to go because it was a ban, for apartheid, you know, for musicians to go to apartheid countries.
And you were going from the UK to South Africa.
Yeah, so we didn't go. But later on, about another 10 years after, we went there, and it was a big, that was at least before South Africa became independent.
And how controversial was that visit?
The visit, actually, it was quite okay, because at that time Mandela is reviving the concept of the African people to move together, you know. So our going there was another impact to make it solid.
Of course, Mandela was one of your big fans, as well as a host of people across the world. I mean, I remember reading that the Jacksons were big fans of yours, Marvin Gaye, the Beatles, Princess Anne. I mean, the list just goes on.
He was a wonderful guy, actually, and you know, to see what is done and what is suffered, you know, it's quite incredible.
But on a lighter note, you were rather close to Shaka Khan, weren't you?
Wow. Well, it's one of those things, you know, as musicians meet, right? And that was early 70s, when somehow I was walking in Chicago, and I saw this woman, this nice young woman, and I asked her, well, you know, how is she? And said, listening to my voice with the African, and said, where do you come from? I said, oh, I come from Ghana, West Africa. I said, yeah. I said, who are you? He said, I'm Chaka Khan. I said, oh, well, that's nice enough, because I don't hear any Americans being called Chaka Khan. So no, we became friends, and I got to know that she's a singer, and we carried on from there.
Well, I mean, the list could go on, couldn't it, Teddy? I mean, there's only we had earlier in the studio, we had what's his name from Parliament. The guy who was the funk master,
the funk master,
Funkadelic, and that George Clinton, and that it's the same era of yours. I mean, in fact, I think George Clinton's quote is in your book, isn't it, about Osibisa and the influence.
Well, we had a tour, you know, with Funkadelics, Osibisa, Mandrill, you know, I mean, all these top black groups, you know, touring America, and it was sensational, you know. And in one of our dressing rooms, we started singing, "Who's got the paper? Who's got the match?" You know, and it became like a fun thing, you know. So later on, we put on a recording.
Brilliant. Teddy, stay with us. Time for another short break, but when we come back, we'll be talking to our guest, Teddy Osei, about his plans with the band this summer.
Thinking of banking in Africa? Then think Zenith, one of the biggest in Nigeria, with assets over $16 billion, listed among the 20 most influential brands in the world, and winner of Best Bank in Corporate Governance. The most customer-focused bank in Nigeria, a success built on 3 foundations, dedicated to people, technology, service. Zenith Bank, in your best interest.
Welcome back to Talking Africa here on Arise News. We continue the conversation with our guest, founder of Osibisa, Teddy Osei. Now, you're still quite busy with Osibisa. Yes. Just before I talk to you about what you've got coming this year, one of the big breakthroughs for you in the 1970s and 80s was that memorable concert in India. Remind us of that.
Well, first of all, India has a relation with drums, right? And we were we didn't know we were very popular in India because we got similarity of drums, right? And we were asked to go to India, you know, for a series of concerts with Delhi, Bombay, Madras, Calcutta, and it was fantastic. And after we'd done the tour, we released a live concert, and it became #1 in India.
Yes, I do recall reading that you were just enormously popular there. But, I mean, all those years later, I mean, we're talking about, you know, stuff that happened in the 70s and 80s. You're still doing Osibisa. I mean, the romp of Osibisa is still going on. Yeah. You performed recently in London. You've just come back from, is it Canada? Yeah. Tell us what you've got coming up this year.
Well, the thing is, we haven't actually been doing, you know, much because you know, because of how you know we've grown, you know, and what we do is we pick and choose which concerts we like to do, and at the moment we're thinking of going to Spain, Barcelona, and Madrid for a huge concert, you know, because we had an award in Spain way back, you know, as the most important group in the world, you know. So we still got a fan base.
Still got a fan base there. But of course, the band Osibisa, in spite of the fact that you wanted to stick with that sort of original purist music that you started with, I mean, you had to evolve, and you eventually came up with some mainstream songs like Sunshine Day and all of that, which became enormous hits, I mean, globally, in America, in the UK, all around the world. I mean, how has the direction of Osibisa changed over the years?
It did change. As I said before, the record companies wanted to make hits, wanted to make money. So it changed from Sunshine Day on to Dance the Body music, The Warrior, you know, and all that. But then, you know, in one of our, about two of our recent recordings, we have brought in a little bit of the old ideas, in, you know, but still maintaining that the young people...
Right, a modern sound.
The modern sound is what will make it. And so that's what we're looking for.
And of course, most people don't know this, but just last year, 2014, your song Sunshine Day was remixed and used as part of the soundtrack of the hit movie Boyhood, which was nominated for an Oscar. That must have been a high moment for you.
It was actually, because we did, you know, I actually did with Robert Courage and mix Sunshine Day.
Robert Bailey, you mean?
No, Robert Courage.
Okay, Robert Courage. Yes. I've actually spoken to Robert. Yes. That's right.
And we did that, and he was approached that they wanted music, you know, for this film, and you know, I mean, he decided, okay, try this Sunshine Day, and they loved it.
Yes, I actually saw the film and I heard it in it, and I just thought, good old Teddy.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the fact, of course, is that, I mean, you're still, after all these years, I mean, I see your face absolutely light up when you're talking about music. I mean, can you ever see yourself giving it up?
Oh, you can ask me that again. I don't know, but probably it's the weakness of the flesh, of the body, that might have me to you know, give it up. you know, but I wouldn't give it up completely. I might be writing songs. I might be.
In other words, you won't give it up voluntarily. You'd be forced to do it, and if you had your choice, you wouldn't give it up.
No.
Now, where do you think African music is heading on the global stage?
You know, for the past few years, it started coming up, but then because this came in as a what do you call it? African world music.
Right.
When world music came in, you know, the African side of it went down because everybody, you know, every country is doing world music. You know, so the idea, it's not like before when Osibisa was doing, you know,
was quite exclusively doing the music. There's a lot of people doing it now.
And there were lots of African musicians like Yusuf Ndoa, and all that came in, and that really did help.
Energize the scene.
Yes.
Now, as you said, a lot of other people doing the music now. In fact, the Nigerian music scene dominating a lot of Africa at the moment, as well as Ghanaian artists. I mean, which emerging artists have you got your sights set on? Who would you say that we should be looking out for?
Ooh.
I mean, African artists.
African artists. Ooh.
Lots of them.
Lots of them. Lots of them. There was one, who should I say?
Well, that could take a while, couldn't it?
Yes, because there are so many young guys coming up. You know, they are not actually doing more of African music.
They're doing more of sort of eclectic international.
That's international. And some also are doing rap, which to me is not necessary.
Well, Teddy, I tell you what, whatever kind of music comes, Osibisa remain #1 for me. Oh. Very honored to have you in here. Teddy Osei, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you.
My thanks to our guest there, the founder of Osibisa, Teddy Osei, and our guests earlier in the program. We're back every night with Africa Rap at 1800 GMT here on Arise News. From me, Charles Onugulu, and from the entire team here in London, goodbye and thank you for watching.